The Fist of Tesla. A grandiose machine of might and magic. The most powerful unit ever released for the game Mage Knight. Completely dwarfing the scale of any other miniature, looking over regular soldiers like the Great Sphinx of Egypt, where each body part gets its own life points and attacks, allowing it to fight with the force of an entire army. A limited edition crown jewel for any collection, this behemoth would release in 2001 for the staggering, awe-inspiring, wallet-trembling price of
$35.
Man, I remember when miniatures games were for everybody, where you could open up the way to a whole new world for as little as $5 and where $35 would get you the pinnacle. Where tables were covered in cheap, tough figures, and where a few pieces of credit card plastic held together by little tabs and surrounded by cardboard islands became a fleet of ships at your command. Gateways into entire genres of gaming at the cost of one's allowance. I mean, sure, most of the contents of these packs were random, but they were also cheap, and in the case of games like MechWarrior and Pirates, added to the feel of the game where you are forced to make the most out of what you have. A realm for the young and old to explore and enjoy. A trend that came and went. A bygone age. Where now, like everything toy-related these days, the only things allowed to exist are either adult, high-quality collectibles or toys for literal babies. Are you a school kid trying to find a fun tabletop hobby that you can buy on your allowance? Tough luck, kid. The companies who've built their reputations and their fortunes on the games I was just describing don't care about that anymore. I'm mad. I'm mad, you guys! Mad because it seems like so many people just kind of ignored the major point I was trying to make in my first video covering Gundam Assemble, and thus are still taking the bait when it comes to comparing the game and its prices to Warhammer by Games Workshop, because that's what Bandai wants in order to justify their egregious prices. Once again, for the people in the back, Gundam Assemble is not a cheaper Warhammer. Gundam Assemble is a more expensive BattleTech. Warhammer is played with dozens of models in a game of inches. Gundam Assemble is played with a handful of minis on a hex grid. BattleTech is played with a handful of minis on a hex grid, and is cheaper somehow despite having models of the same size and quality. Once again, Gundam Assemble is a sort of Bandai-branded BattleTech that I have since been made aware copies about 90% of its rules from the World of Warcraft miniatures game, another game by Justin Gary that came out 15 years ago, lasted one expansion, then died. At the tail end of what I call the Click Games era, where, started by games like HeroClix, MechWarrior, and Mage Knight, a lot of companies were making these sorts of inexpensive games aimed at younger audiences that had some kind of built-in tracking feature, which admittedly did get oversaturated after a while. It's a game that's so obscure that I forgot it existed in the initial Gundam Assemble video I made. Man, and to think the things I was praising Gundam Assemble for already existed in a game that died 15 years ago. And I know that licensing issues were involved, but the fact remains that folks thought that the World of Warcraft trading card game was worth not just saving, but also iterating upon later, while the miniatures game was left to die. Partially because of how terrible this box design is. I know I talk about box design a lot, but here's an example of it done wrong. It's got this sort of void to the side that makes it look like there was originally more stuff in here, like there were supposed to be 6 miniatures, but now there's only 4, as if they changed their minds last minute but didn't have enough time to change the boxes. In fact, seeing this again kind of reminds me why I personally never picked up the game, because every single starter set looked like there was something missing. I managed to pick up this box, brand new, for just 20 bucks. Although I will give the game one bit of praise, it actually has this neat thing where each player gets color-coded dial bases to clip their minis into, which keep track of health by clicking the miniature around, and I assume this thing hasn't appeared in other games since then because as an actual functioning mechanism rather than just a game mechanic, it's likely covered under a patent. Shame, really. This video came in part, mostly by providing the venue, by the Days of Nights in lovely tax-free Delaware. If you're looking for a store that has both the newest releases in gaming, as well as a bunch of mysterious treasures, such as Battletech or the Fist of Tesla, they've even got Gundams if you're into that kind of thing, check out the Days of Nights. They are also the hosts of Doc's Game Club, where I filmed part of this video. Link in the description, and tell them I said hi. A quick step back. Gundam is a long-running series about the eponymous robot mechs that are treated less like magical superweapons and more like mundane military hardware. The series is supported with a line of plastic model kits, where, rather than simply buying the action figure, you instead get the pieces of the model kit that you then have to clip out, trim, and assemble by hand, sort of like a Lego set with sharp objects. And as far as my experience with model kits are concerned, Gundam kits are a treat. They are generally push-fit but very well molded and made of multicolored plastic, so the finished action figure looks great even without any paint. And you can even pose them and stuff. They're also pretty nicely priced as well. Your typical high-grade kit, which is their most common, I would say, pulp format, averages rarely more than $20. These Gundam plastic model kits, or Gunpla for short, are so reasonably priced, in fact, that many people use them as an example when compared to the greed of Games Workshop, who are charging so much more for so much less plastic.
Nice.
And with the approach of the 40th anniversary of the Gundam series, Bandai decided to put out their own miniatures game, which is also kind of a trend right now. We have new miniatures games in the vein of Games Workshop, where we've seen ones for Star Wars and Marvel and StarCraft most recently. Bandai decided to throw their hat in the ring with the Gundam Assemble miniatures game, giving them the chance to really rub it in Warhammer's face by keeping those prices low, and they chose not to. So, with that out of the way, let's get to why we're here. In my previous video about Gundam Assemble, I said the following in regards to this hideously overpriced Gundam Seed set. I ran the numbers, that is over $12 per figure. You can buy an actual Gundam for that price. This comment was, again, based on the fact that I and others have made the observation that Gundam kits are a whole lot cheaper than the equivalent sets made by Games Workshop, despite containing as much as, if not way more, plastic. And while Bandai could have used that as a way to do a slam dunk game that was also super cheap and just allowed them to keep laughing at Games Workshop even more, they decided they liked the prices that Games Workshop were charging and just kind of went along with it. Honestly, it kind of made my heart sink. And now that I think about it, it's actually worse than that, because Bandai is trying to have their cake and eat it too, by claiming that their expensive game is somehow cheap, despite costing more than their primary competition, which is, again, Battletech! Not to mention, prices aside, these offerings kinda suck. They have several waves of items advertised, but nothing that gamers might actually like to have, like special dice, or premium battle mat, or miniature storage, or spare hex spaces, or team color markers, or acrylic tokens, or even the nice plastic terrain they show off in their own demonstration videos. And going back to that hex spaces one, many people's first exposure to Gundam Assemble was through these special starter kit combinations that came with the starter decks for the Gundam card game, but it seems like if I want to actually be able to play with these miniatures that I have already bought, paid for, assembled, and painted, I will have to buy this set again in order to get the proper bases and cards, which in this case is $50. You gotta admit, for figures that I already own, that's pretty messed up. They're still selling them like this, by the way, with the regular round bases, not even the proper hex bases, and none of the cards, even though everybody knows the game is coming out. My game store ordered like a few dozen of these boxes that include the promo cards and the figures, and they are just sitting there. Editor Doc here, they have officially said it out loud with their protection of intellectual property thing. They are straight up saying that you are not allowed to use proxy cards in any kind of official events. So yeah, it looks like if I want to play this game, I do indeed have to buy that $50 set again. Joy. Which brings us to now, and the subject of this video. I am going to be taking this piss take to a full froth. I'm going to be putting my money where my mouth is to prove once and for all that it is actually cheaper to play Gundam Assemble with the model kits than with the actual sets they've put out. And it's actually not going to be as hard as you might think, because most Gundam model kits are made at the same standard scale, what they call 1/144th scale, so building a wargame out of these kits will actually be pretty easy. Still, I think I should set myself some reasonable ground rules for this challenge. Firstly, I must do this with unassembled official Bandai kits sold in the United States. No Temu knockoff Gundams, no used kits that have already been completely put together, no using Hobby Search to take advantage of the weak yen. I mean, the shipping alone would probably offset all of those benefits. I must also use the actual suits depicted. I cannot, for example, pick up this $12 entry-grade Wing Gundam that I used in my example and claim that it's taking the place of the Wing Gundam Zero Custom. That said though, I will allow myself to take advantage of coupons and sales like any sane individual would. However, if I want to actually count a sale price, the item must actually be for sale and in stock. No back orders, no zombie prices. I also won't count stuff that would actually affect Gundam Assemble itself, like paying taxes or shipping or buying cutting tools or whatever. I am, however, allowing myself one lever I can pull in case of emergencies. I'll bring it up if it ever becomes necessary. The goal is to average either less than the product I am recreating or have an average at or below $12.15 per model as calculated from the Gundam seed set. Heck, I'm being nice by taking aim at the seed set. If I wanted to be especially mean, I would have gone after the so-called expansion sets, which want over $13 for each of their figures while not including any dice or terrain. So let's give a quick example of this. Why don't we recreate the set I technically already own?
That's just a stupid boulder!
No, this is Patrick.
It's not just a boulder! It's a rock! A rock!
No, this is Patrick.
Oh, the pioneers used to ride these babies for miles, and it's in great shape.
Will you forget the stupid pioneers? Have you ever noticed that there are none of them left? And now you're telling me they thought they could drive?
A unit can move up to 3 hexes in any direction.
Rocks? Hold on there, Jethro!
No, this is Patrick.
The White Base Squad, featuring the original Gundam, the bright red gun cannon, and the blue gun tank. This set of 3 figures, along with clearly fewer paints than what was used on the models in the picture, is again asking for $50. That's crazy! The sets like this from other games are either more generous, like my Heroescape set that includes 10 paints, or they are cheaper, like this one from Games Workshop? Wow, so much for people claiming that Gundam Assemble is the cheaper game when they got stuff like this going on. As for these kits, the Gundam is the easy part. Why? Because I already own it. The entry-grade RX-78-2 Gundam, which includes about as much plastic as the Gundam Assemble starter set, is a loss leader with a suggested retail price in the United States of $9.99, and as low as 550 yen in Japan. Off to a good start, and I actually managed to find a place online that was having it on sale for 10% off, dropping it down to just $9. Heck, I even found the proper high grade for $12.46 if I was feeling spicy. Heck, if you've never done Gunpla before, I actually recommend this kit for your first one, as it's about the same quality as the older high grade kits I used to build. Designed to be easy to build and looking absolutely stunning even without paint, glue, or even cutters. Find the version with the extra weapon sprue if you can, it's usually just a couple bucks more. But $9 is a solid start. Next, the high-grade gun tank, which, while it was available, I was able to get for a crisp $10.95. It's not even labeled as a sale price, I don't know what's up here, aside from the fact that the mold for this kit is 25 years old, and the fact that it's the gun tank, which is kind of the dullard of this lot. Hey, Editor Doc here, I actually managed to find one for the same price that I found the entry-grade Gundam for, $9, so there's that then. The troublemaker, however, was the gun cannon. It also has an old kit, but it isn't the gun tank, so it's more popular and thus more difficult to find. And let me tell you, when I was searching, I came across so many fake Gundam kits on eBay, you guys. Be careful. Make sure you buy new in-box only. So I decided to cut my losses and save some shipping by buying it from the same place that I got the gun tank from, on sale for $15.65. And this one is the more modern refresh from 2015, which lives up more to the Gunpla we are used to today. Editor Doc again, I found this one on eBay complete with a legit box for $14.57. $15 seems to be the average for these sorts of kits actually, which considering my target of $12 each will add to the struggle. Anyway, with these 3 model kits in hand, I was able to replicate the Gundam white base squad of miniatures with paint set with my white base squad of full-on model kits which don't need any paint for $35.43. And I could have gotten it for even less. So, how did I do? Well, I certainly got it under $50, and for those of you who say I'm being unfair and should compare to the kits that don't have paint in them, guess what? I beat that too. Heck, I even beat my own target of $12.15 per model by almost $4. Yeah, I absolutely nailed this one. In video game terms, I 3-starred the level. And not only were these cheaper than the figures for the game, they're, you know, model kits. Action figures that you can pose and equip however you like. Which brings up an interesting point, because all 3 of these have at least 2 iterations for some reason in Gundam Assemble. Heck, the Gundam here gets 3. Thanks to the fact that these are model kits, I can freely swap their equipment and change their poses to make them each fall in line with these different versions of the characters, meaning I essentially got 2 or even 3 characters in one, which if I'm being honest is probably how this game should have always been. Apparently there's a game out there that actually does something like this, and maybe I should give that one a look. Still, I've given myself options, so technically an additional edge over the official game. But can I take it further? Can I say maybe recreate the Gundam Assemble starter set with these same parameters? I mean, I'm probably not going to beat the actual price of that set, which is just $35. I mean, I'm already there with just 3 kits, and the Gundam Assemble starter set is the only thing remotely reasonable priced in this entire endeavor, but could I maybe do it with my initial joke? My $12.15, you could buy an actual Gundam for that much price set, buy the Gundam Seed set while actually getting everything together? Well, I can certainly try. So, the Gundam Assemble starter set includes 6 mobile suits: the original Gundam, the Gundam Barbatos Lupus Rex, the Wing Zero Custom, the Epion, Char's Custom Zaku 2, and the Vidar. Well, I'm off to a good start with my $8.90 Gundam, and as for its counterpart, Char's Zaku, the cheapest one I could find was $13.99 at the USA Gundam store, which also offers a 10% off coupon, dropping it down to $12.60. Pretty good, though this is an older kit like the gun cannon. For the purposes of this video though, I will be using the more recent high grade from the same refresh as the gun cannon, which you can tell because it's a salmon color with a nice strong red on the body rather than pink and super dark red. It's a bit newer, a bit fancier, a bit pricier, and a bit already in my collection. It's the natural counterpart to my entry grade Gundam after all. Heck, it wouldn't surprise me how many people already have viable armies out of the Gunpla they already own. The cheaper high grade more resembles this old Garmazabi custom I've owned for like 20 years, hence why it looks so terrible. Yeah, I've been building Gunpla since many of you were in diapers. I'd replace this Garmazabi kit, but it's like $50. That makes our current total $21.50. Not bad, we're $2 below par already. And I'm going to need that wiggle room because moving up the timeline, we get to the Wing Gundam Zero Custom. Not regular Wing or Wing Zero, specifically the version with those crazy angel wings from the movie. Which is an issue, as while the custom is easily the most iconic version of this mobile suit, at least in the United States, kits for its other forms, the basic Wing and the Wing Zero, are a lot easier to find, and a lot cheaper. Thankfully, however, I got eBay lucky. Found an old high-grade kit unassembled for $13.99, which is honestly pretty good for a kit this old. I mean, I also found some reprints of the kit on average at $15 on most sites like Barnes & Noble, but all of them are basically back-ordered, and remember my rule on no zombie prices, but $14 doesn't seem to be that unusual for this kit. It's kind of a funny kit too. It really shows its age thanks to its lack of pectoral joints, that being the swivels and movement where the arms connect to the body at the shoulder, and the feet are just one big chunk. Even my entry-grade Gundam is more sophisticated than this old thing. In fact, to compensate for its complete lack of shoulder articulation, it comes with a second torso piece that is slouched forward so that it can assume the shooting pose shown on the box, whereas kits made today can do that without any kind of special attachments. It's a nostalgic kit for me though, as I, like many Gundam fans my age, got into it around the time this kit was first released. Seeing those posts rather than the modern shoulders did remind me of different times. The problem, however, is its counterpart, Gundam Epyon. Because here's the thing about Epyon, they do not make kits for this thing. Not like the Zero Custom, that's for sure. It hasn't gotten a high-grade revamp or reissue since literally the turn of the millennium. The ugly jobber suit that lasted less than 10 seconds in the War in the Pocket side story OVA has gotten more printings more recently than the final boss of America's Gateway Gundam? It's disgraceful! So, high-grade Epyon kits aren't that hard to find on eBay for pretty low prices, but the catch is that they tend to already have been assembled. And like I said before, half the fun of Gunpla is building them. And while there is a recent 144 kit for the Epyon, it's, and that's because it is what is called a real grade kit. So, the two most common grades, or basically difficulty and complexity of model type, of Gundam kits are high grade, which come in 1/144th scale and are usually simple enough to put together in an afternoon, and master grade, which are 1/100th scale and much more complex, easily taking a week of afternoons to finish. And while there are other grades, like the entry grade I talked about before, most kits tend to be one of these two. A real grade kit is essentially a master grade kit at high grade scale, all of the complexity made obnoxiously tinier, which is why this Epyon costs more than most master grade kits. So yeah, Bandai has screwed me over on this endeavor by simply not providing me with a reasonable choice between a kit that hasn't been reprinted in over 20 years and thus is gonna be kind of old and gnarly, or a $60 glorified high grade. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I am not getting this real grade. Real grade kits have a really bad reputation anyway, so I'm not interested in dropping $60 on a mobile suit that I'm really not that passionate about. That said, at this point, I found myself at a crossroads. Do I keep checking eBay every day hoping for a kit that somebody kept unbuilt for 2 decades at a reasonable price, or do I finally pull that lever? So let's get back to this. This lever, the one I left myself to pull in case I got into trouble, allows me to switch from trying to match this starter set exactly to simply building a 3 versus 3 out of any model kits that have a confirmed Gundam Assemble equivalent. This would allow me to use the entry grade Wing and Strike Gundams for $12 and wow, $8.86, as well as bringing back the gun tank, at which point I have about $20 left over to throw at whatever I want. But what if there was a third option? I mean, it's still a Gundam Epyon, just look at it in the title. And it's still a posable model kit that I have to assemble from new, and it's $9?
You wanna play rough? Okay. Say hello to my little friend!
Little being the operative word here because, well, yeah. This is the SD Gundam Epyon Nobunaga version. Who's Nobunaga? Oda Nobunaga was basically Japan's George Washington, the guy who ended the Warring States period and unified all of Japan, but apparently he was a bit of a dick about it. The fact that he's portrayed as the amoral Gundam Epyon shows that even the Japanese have conflicted thoughts about the man. Now, these little chibified cartoonish SD or super deformed Gundams are actually nothing new, and even SD Gundams based on the Warring States period are almost as old as the franchise itself, as shown in the SD Gundam series that came out around the time of Double Zeta. SD Gundam kits have been a thing for a long time too, and they tend to be pretty inexpensive, often being roughly $10 to $12, exactly the price range I was going for. So if I decided to go with SD figures for the entire lineup, I would have no problem hitting my goal either, even at MSRP. And what's that I see in the Gundam Assemble trailer? That's an SD Gundam! They're coming to Gundam Assemble! Oh no, they're coming to Gundam Assemble! Now, I will admit, this guy is a bit of a stretch as far as my rules are concerned, but it is a fully posable model kit that I had to assemble by hand called Epyon. The only Epyon kit they've printed that isn't $60 over the past 20 years. But then another crossroads happened, because I did find a high-grade Epyon kit that was unbuilt for just $12. The problem? Well, you see, it's only mostly unbuilt. It was a partially assembled old Gundam Epion high-grade kit from 1995. About halfway finished, so I do still technically have to finish building it, which means I do have to build it. More bending the rule rather than breaking it. They're more like guidelines anyway. And yeah, I know this might cause some belly aching. I mean, never mind the fact that I'm going to have to finish building somebody's 30-year-old Gundam Epion kit. But, I mean, if I wanted to, I could have gone full scorched earth on this video and been like,
So here I am, I'm gonna buy 6 of these Gundam first grade kits, which are on sale for $4.50, and while it sounds like I'm buying 6 of the same kit, the Gundam has 3 variations on it, so each of them is a squad of 3 different units according to the rules, and at $4.50 a pop, that equals 20 is $7, leaving me enough left over to use as coupon for Burger King.
oh, that's good. But I'm not gonna do that. Partially because after doing my due diligence, I found out that these entries are most likely fake and this store is a scam. I mean, that whole thing about, you know, if something's too good to be true. But the real reason I'm doing this is because I know that you guys have expectations. You click on a video called Gundam Assemble with actual Gundams, and you have kind of a bare minimum that you are going for, and I want to deliver on that. This is really the only place where I'm making any kind of extraordinary exception, because these are extraordinarily exceptional circumstances. There are just not that many choices for the Gundam Epion kit, so consider this as much a protest of the fact that we haven't gotten a nice new high-grade Epion kit in a long time, as well as just my general protest over Gundam Assemble as a whole. I went with the partially assembled kit. Let's rock.
But it's becoming increasingly obvious. I can deny it no longer. I am small.
Oh, I hate this. It's old and it's smelly and it stinks and it's bad. Why is the sword so small? Why are so many parts just straight up the wrong color? And why is it so...
What are not under exceptional circumstances, however, are the Iron-Blooded Orphans kits, the Barbatos Lupus Rex and the Vidar, which actually just got a line refresh in April, so no excuses here. Heck, that means that these are fully subject to the tariff boogeyman people keep using as an excuse for Assemble's higher prices. Oh boy, a real stress test on this one. The Vidar reprint wasn't too hard. I was able to find it at the Big Bad Toy Store for $15, meaning I could probably get it below par with a sale, but it just had to be the Lupus Rex, didn't it? The Barbatos Lupus would have been fine. There's a $13 kit for it at Barnes & Noble. The Rex I couldn't find for less than $18. Ouch. Thus, as it stands, without a little miracle, I am officially $7 over my limit, all because of Iron-Blooded Orphans. Which still isn't bad, but the thing is, I came to this conclusion at the tail end of the month, and thus the end of the current run of coupons and sale prices at most major retailers, meaning that when the day rolled over... So yeah, Michaels at time of writing sells Gundams, and while they do tend to be pretty hideously overpriced both online and in stores, it's because Michaels is one of those places. You know, the place where the prices are really high, but you need to use the coupons to bring them back down to normal. And Michaels has, as long as I have known them, been putting out coupons in the scope of like 25 to 40% off in my inbox, and I so happen to have gotten one of these monster 40% off coupons in the process of making this video. And as it turns out, in a funny little twist of fate, while the online store said that my local Michaels was out, since I work like just a few hundred feet away from it, I literally walked there and discovered that they actually did have one left. And after applying my 40% off coupon, it dropped down to $13.19, which is as good a price as any as you can get for this kit, honestly. But Michaels also offers a $5 off coupon for any new account that spends $20. So if I had, say, you know, already purchased a bunch of supplies that I would use for hobbies, like a hobby knife and paint and brushes and stuff like that, I would probably have a $5 coupon lying around that allowed me to bring this price down to $8.19, our lowest price yet. leaving me with a remaining balance to find the Barbatos Lupus Rex of $17.22. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back in it. And not soon after this, a website with a suspicious name that certainly resembles a certain Japan website, but a relatively active social media presence, had our answer. Their price for the Barbatos Lupus Rex came out to $16.91. And it actually showed up, so unlike my previous entry with those super cheap Gundams, this is a real place. And so, with that out of the way, let's line it up. Entry grade Gundam RX-78-2, $8.90. Char's Custom Zaku, $12.60 after coupon. Gundam Wing Zero Custom, $13.99. Gundam Epion, $12. Gundam Vidar, $8.19 after coupons. And finally, Barbatos Lupus Rex, $16.91. And on a budget limit of $12.15 per model, or $72.90 in total, my final total was $72.59. I did it! I really did it! I just proved that it was possible to
Mostly.
recreate the Gundam Assemble starter set at the same price average as the hideously overpriced Gundam Seed Deluxe set. A set that literally has the same Gundam in it 4 times. And yes, I know this wasn't perfect, but again, Epion was the only rule that I bent. I got Zero Custom, I got Lupus Rex, forgive me for not putting more effort into fishing up a 25-year-old kit. And as for sourcing these things, it actually wasn't as bad as you might expect. I was able to get it with just a couple of eBay purchases, one online store, and the rest I found by just walking out into my local area. Support your local hobby shops, folks. Like Days of Nights in lovely tax-free Delaware.
But what about dice?
Hark? What is that sound that I hear? Is that the USA Gundam store descending with even better coupons? Better coupons letting me carve off an extra $3 that I can then turn around and take to my local LGS to buy a bunch of dice with? You mean like Days of Nights in beautiful tax-free Delaware? But yeah, victory is mine. I had set out to build the Gundam Assemble starter set at an average price of $12.15 per model, and thanks to those 11th hour coupons, I was able to do it for $11.66 per model, beating the original score by almost $3. And if I wanted to, I could have actually made another improvement, because this Endless Waltz Gundam here, I was able to find the real grade version of the kit for just $2 more.
Oh no, this is one of the bad ones, isn't it?
Although, I suppose, considering how far along I've gotten on this, it might not be a bad time to reflect on what got us here to begin with. After all, I started this a while ago, and I suppose some of that initial anger has faded away, but I still find Gundam Assemble uniquely frustrating. It's literally a case of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. The only people I've seen who do anything to defend these prices are, I guess, the folks who are used to overpaying. You know, those poor people who have never really experienced what it means to be able to play a war game for cheap. Or I guess they've just never heard of Battletech. To somebody who has built some Gunpla but has never really touched a war game before, these prices of more than $12 for a tiny little 2-inch plastic figure, often matching or even in excess of the actual full-size action figure model kits, will probably turn them away. In reproducing the starter set for Gundam Assemble, I spent about twice what I would have on the actual set, and I'm sure there are those out there who will claim that I failed in this endeavor as a result. But here's the thing. Even though I couldn't beat that price point, nor could I beat the price point of the Abawa Ku set, I did beat both the Gundam Seed price and the expansion set price. Heck, I basically nuked the expansion set price from orbit. This means that playing Gundam Assemble with the actual full-scale model kits is the middle-of-the-road option, which is an embarrassment, especially since My Way lets you both buy the models piecemeal, assuming you don't already own them, and each of those models can be built to take on as many roles as Gundam Assemble gives them. It is insane to me that Gundam Assemble's prices are so high that playing it with the actual model kits is not only the cheaper option a lot of the time, it's also straight up the better one. Bandai, you did this to yourselves. Don't be surprised if the game dies off. So, I guess we're done here. I was able to get all of the Gundam pieces to play the board game with, and, am I forgetting something? The Gundam Assemble board game. Oh no, I forgot the board, didn't I? And I don't have any money left. All I have are these 6 robots and all of the crazy shipping boxes that they arrived in, and... Wait a minute! Fun fact, hobby gamers. Cardboard is free. Cardboard is free. Not only do you get a box with every order shipped your way, you can go into any big box store in the country and say, "Hello there, sir. May I have this pile of garbage that you are literally going to throw away?" Most of the time, you'll get a yes. So yeah, we're going to make our elevated terrain out of cardboard, just like the real Gundam Assemble. $170, by the way. First things first though, I have to decide what scale I want this board to be at. Of course, it cannot be the same scale as the actual Gundam Assemble kit. That would be, unfeasible, I think. These kits fit on hexes that are roughly 1 inch to a side. My first instinct was to simply double them. 2-inch sides or 4-inch diameter hexes, which may not allow Johnny Cage levels of flexing, but I can get some good enough poses. The 3v3 starter map is 14 hexes by 15 hexes, which by our new measurements will form a roughly 4 foot by 4 foot battlefield, or in wargaming terms, completely average. But I want to future-proof this design, because Bandai actually makes a whole line of hex-shaped bases for their model kits, which would be an obvious upgrade over simply having these kits stand on their own 2 feet, even though they kinda suck at actually being good stands, honestly. Man, it's a sad day when the ones I got off of AliExpress have both better stability and more clutch power. These bases are 2 1/4 inch to a side, or 4.5 inch diameter, which, with our maths again, adds about another 6 inches to each side, pushing it to just over 4 feet by 4 feet, but letting me use these stands and terrain bases if I wanted to. Still not bad. Pretty much any game store worth its salt is ready for some war games that use this amount of table space, so I'm still not out of bounds. For sanity's sake, I'll be drawing the actual game board on paper. Gundam Assemble does so as well, and just like cardboard, pretty much everybody has some paper lying around. In the starter set map used in most of the demonstrations for Gundam Assemble, there are a bunch of platforms. 4 1-hex platforms, 8 2-hex platforms, a 5-hex long diamond, and a honeycomb on top of that one. These are what I will cut out of the cardboard. Also, apparently, unlike the actual game, I'm going to be prefabbing the shapes rather than clustering together all of these dodgy singletons like I keep seeing. Something else I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make the platforms themselves a bit larger, 2.5 inches per side, or 5 inches in diameter, sort of mushrooming off of the base a little bit, so that these official Bandai stands can have some wiggle room when placed on high and won't worry about stability as much. It's time for some arts and crafts. Now, when it came to actually designing these platforms, the most common element on the map is the 2-hex platform, so it is what I made first. I of course included the slightly larger 2.5 sides to a base, which has this sort of little outline I added to show that it's been expanded a bit, which I then configured to use 1/2 inch thick cardboard, and it wound up being a little over 6 inches tall. And while I did design the stand to be a little over 6 inches tall, it allowed me to do this trick where I add another hexagon puck in the middle of it, which I can punch out and slice in half in order to form the supports for the feet and have a nice, efficient 2-hex platform. And the best part of this design, it is all push fit. Yeah, the only adhesive in play is what's holding the template on, and I guess what's holding the cardboard layers together, but otherwise it doesn't need any extra doctoring, no tape or anything, and the puck cutout in the center actually makes a nice spot to hold the platform so it can be easily placed and moved around. Wow, turns out a guy whose channel is all about critiquing product design knows a thing or two at product design, huh? What a surprise. Though I did have to adapt it a bit. My initial design had these smooth, loping curves on them, which I thought would be fun and appealing, but while they looked pleasing, they were a pain to try and cut out, and so I switched to the more boring, but more practical, straight lines. I mean, I didn't have to include this taper at all, but I wanted it to at least look a little stylish, which got a lot easier once I pulled out the saw. A little rescaling to get the 1-hex platforms, and we're in business. But then there's the big guys. I started with this honeycomb shape, and you would think I would just scale up the twofers into a set of 7 hexes, but the problem there is that such a thing would increase the size of the entire piece and take up more space than it would need, so instead I took the segments in the normal size and added a sort of fringe for the whole setup in order to provide that extra bit of wiggle room I was talking about before. As for the supports for all of these, I literally just used the same supports I developed for the double hex and just used them again here. So, it's been kind of fun working on this system. I admit a lot of it has been kind of literal shots in the dark. I actually haven't had to do a lot of modifications to it other than the ones I just talked about before, but something that actually came up during the design process was people were concerned about how much storage space that this nice big thing that uses these actual figures will take up, and the answer is about this much. You see, that's part of the fun of making these designs push fit, is that when I'm done playing, I can just take it apart and shrink it back down to this size again. So I have all 4 of the single size pucks. Their stands. Those pucks there. I have all 8 of the doubles. And their stands, all 8 of them. I still have some cutting to do on these, but it's not much longer now. And finally, underneath, we have the honeycomb piece. It's about the size of a frisbee. So this is quite literally every single piece that goes into it. So if you're concerned about space, because of the way I designed it, there's no tape, there's no glue, except for the glue holding on the patterns and whatever glue is necessary to hold these pieces together to make them an inch thick. So I have, aside from like the map, there really isn't a lot of space that this thing needs in order to store it. So if you have like limited space, but you still want to play this game, well, guess what? You just have to, I don't know, throw away a couple of your empty master grade boxes and you'd have all the room in the world for it. Almost. Because I have hit one little problem, because while I did show off the honeycomb and how large that's going to be, there is the issue of that platform that it sits on top of. And unfortunately, with my current measurements, that darn thing is almost 3 feet long, like roughly the size of a small table. And that's kind of where I'm debating where I should go on this, because it's not a question of whether I have enough cardboard or not.
Because I do.
The question is, do I want to keep this as a solid piece, or do I want to, I don't know, break it into parts or things like that? And I suppose I could like saw it down the middle if I wanted to, but you know what? Honestly, I think I'm just going to keep it as it is. Because to make an endeavor this large with only one piece that's a bit of a burden outside of, the actual map itself, which will roll pretty well, I think I've done a pretty good job. It would probably be a different story if, say, we made this thing out of acrylic. And I actually did have some people, while I was developing this, say, hey, what if we did these patterns for acrylic? And that would actually mean they take up even less space. Acrylic is a lot narrower, so this would be a lot shorter. A lot of these connecting points would have to be modified to take the much thinner thing. I imagine it might be heavier, though, but it would probably be sturdier. Well, except for like this big piece on the bottom and the table there. But the thing is, by doing it in acrylic, you kind of have to laser cut that. So these pieces would be a lot more precise. So you could probably make the entire thing out of just the 1s and 2s. I've made this a modular enough system. Even that big table I just showed you can be held up by the same platforms I used to make the 2s. So it's not going to be that difficult at all. Oh my god. I mean, I was able to get like some of the really good like U-line like pallet shipper like really hard stiff cardboard, but let me tell you, it really did feel like I was carving a table out of this thing. But then that goes on like that. Oh, maybe that's not the best spacing in the world. Maybe this does need some fixing after all. But thanks to getting such sturdy cardboard, I was able to convert these center posts into attachment for joiner plates to hold the honeycomb in place above it, along with creating more streamlined straight up and down platforms in order to hold these up so they're not occupying so much space. Of course, I could add more sides to these builds, letting me seal off areas so people don't mistake them for areas you can approach or shoot through, but this works well enough. And then I can just use the offcuts for the objectives, bastions, and other tokens. I know these might look a little crude, but the venue I wanted to set this up at, which is, of course, Days of Nights in lovely tax-free Delaware, opened up a time slot for me kind of out of nowhere, and I really only had about 2 hours to make all of these from scratch, so I only had enough time to make one of each, but I'm sure you realize, if I can make one, I can make more. So, Gundam Assemble measures turns through a timeline, something it copies from the World of Warcraft game, where each character starts on the timeline and their actions cost different amounts of time, meaning every character gets multiple turns per round. These are measured with tokens in the game of Gundam Assemble, so where do we get those? Well, I would have done it, but it would have made the boxes and instructions so much less photogenic. Yeah, you can just cut the pieces out of the box, or instructions, or ideally any sort of catalog your hobby store might have. Heck, I have a 30-minute systems catalog that suggests doing this exact thing. And while it's totally possible to write the different cards by hand, I'm willing to toss 50 cents to run some copy paper to get the rest of it done. And with that, let's see the results. And there you have it. With just 2 tables pushed together, typical for any sort of war game, I have the entire starter set up and running at some of the smaller game store tables. I suppose the verticality can be a little distracting, but most people can reach the top of these just fine, and it breaks down again into a medium-sized box. And since the whole thing is modular and push-fit, should anything break, I can just make another one. Oh, but what about the stuff I use to actually make these things? You know, the cutting tools, glue, and paint? Those cost me a whopping rule number 4. You know, the rule that covers things like cutting tools, glue, and paint. As for how fun each of these kits were to build, the Entry Gundam is, like I said before, one of my favorite kits of all time. The Gun Tank and Zero Custom are from about the same era and both showed their age. The Zaku and Gun Cannon are from their era and were a bit more of a joy to put together. I actually filmed the Gun Cannon being put together here. The Epion kit really showed its age, and the Vidar was fun, but the Barbatos Lupus Rex was actually a little bit disappointing, considering that it doesn't ship with its claws in the right color. They originally came gray, but I had to paint them yellow. It's especially painful considering that entry-grade kits come with the eyes rendered in the proper colored plastic. Well, the best way to paint yellow is to base coat with pink, and seeing as I was doing the fingernails, there were some complications. Oh my god, yas, Orga, we should totally conquer Mars and stuff. Seriously, if the Barbatos Lupus Rex ever gets a gun girl version, it should definitely be some kind of Gyaru. And truth be told, I have been in the background doctoring a lot of these model kits as well. I mean, I do this as a hobby, so things like painting the gray claws of the Epion and Barbatos in their proper yellow is just something I already do out of habit. I even painted the Epion's tiny little sword, and I think I actually did a better job of it than the version in the instructions. I mean, from here it looks like a Mylar balloon. But I can't say it's any more effort to paint than if I had actually gotten the Assemble kit, which charges what it does for kits that you still have to paint despite using the same plastic as their regular model kits. Believe me, I can tell. The detail is no more impressive than, again, the kits that literally render the eyes with colored plastic. Sadly, since the information for the tactics cards in the starter set is not fully out yet, I could not make this game 100% functional. And I had to make my best guesses in a few places, and while I might not have them ready in time for when this video goes out, I can at least try to prepare the templates I use to make these platforms and tokens. I also made a shorter version that matches up better with your typical shipping box top flap size, so it's still easy for anybody to make. If you think you can improve upon anything I accomplished in this video, by all means feel free. Anything that can just drive the hammer even more into Bandai's face. In the end, my Gundam Assemble is both bigger and better than the official one, while keeping the price reasonable. I might trot it out as a stunt from time to time, seeing as it doesn't take up that much space in the end, but if this still seems like it's a little bit much, I'd say give BattleTech a try. It's generally a cheaper game that either costs less or gives more per box than even the likes of Gundam Assemble. They're like one of the only games left that still has a reasonable price point. They're also one of the only games that still uses blind boxes, the salvage boxes, which are wildly popular. Not to mention, each of the battle mechs you get in these blind boxes can be one of multiple variations, including unique characters, and actually work across multiple different games, both BattleTech Classic and Alpha Strike. So you're getting a lot of value out of one of these boxes. Though, speaking of blind boxes, in an extra bit of embarrassment, it turns out that Bandai themselves also make blind box model kits which cost... oh no. I don't think anybody would be upset if Gundam Assemble also used this system as well, where you get just one model inside along with the cards necessary to play them. It could allow dabbling, drafting, and all sorts of fun stuff. Now, if only somebody else could be brave enough to actually make their miniatures game this cheap. Because as Gundam Assemble stands, it's more expensive to play it with the miniatures than it is with the actual model kits, as I have proven in this video. So, have fun, go and build, and until next time, this is Kodak signing off.